On April of 1906, just before 5 a.m., the people of San Francisco were awoken to what would become the deadliest earthquake in U.S. history. The 7.9 magnitude quake literally shook the city for minutes and left it in complete and utter chaos. Fires quickly broke out and thousands of buildings were destroyed or severely damaged. With no functioning fire department and most of the city's resources gone due to the quake, things didn't look good for San Francisco. But then something miraculous happened. People from across the country, even the country's bitterest rival at the time, Mexico, rushed to the aid of the suffering city. This was despite the fact that there were still several lingering issues between the two countries, including an ongoing border dispute, an anarchist movement in Mexico seeking to overthrow its government, and an assassination attempt on Mexico's ambassador to the UKTS. Just a few months prior, President Roosevelt had even threatened war with Mexico over the border dispute. But in the face of tragedy, all of this was forgotten. Relief efforts immediately began, and thousands of Mexicans and Mexican Americans crossed the border into San Francisco to help with the recovery. They came from all walks of life, too. There were doctors, lawyers, shopkeepers, farm workers, students, and veterans. Together, they formed the first organized civilian force to arrive after the earthquake, and they performed heroic feats of rescue, saving countless lives. So, in this episode, we're going to take a look at their story. Let's get into it. In the early morning hours of April 18, 1906, the people of San Francisco were shaken awake by a violent earthquake. It literally felt like the world was ending. And when the dust eventually settled, they realized that it sort of was. The 7.9 magnitude quake, which lasted a reported 60 seconds, destroyed thousands of buildings and left tens of thousands of people homeless. Fires quickly broke out and spread throughout the city, fanned by strong winds. It was estimated that about 3,000 buildings were destroyed and another 20,000 were damaged. Around 3,000 people were injured, and perhaps as many as 3,000 had lost their lives. As if that wasn't bad enough, outside help was nowhere to come. The U.S. Navy had patrolled the coast with gunboats, and they were prepared to crack down on any looting. But their presence was more symbolic than anything because they couldn't actually do much to help. All of the city's resources were completely depleted. Telegraphs and telephone lines were down, the water mains were broken, streets were impassable, and the fire department was unable to respond to the hundreds of blazes that broke out across the city. The only thing that could be done was wait for outside help to arrive. And the question was, who would come to the aid of San Francisco? Well, one of the first places that came to mind was Mexico. Despite the tensions that existed between the two countries, Mexico's president, Porfirio Diaz, wanted to show the world that his country was not uncivilized. In fact, he wanted to prove that Mexico was capable of great things. So he immediately dispatched General Victoriano Huerta, along with several thousand federal troops to aid in the relief effort. But Huerta and his men weren't the first ones there. That honor went to a group of Mexican civilians who had heard about the quake through the grapevine, and they wasted no time getting to work. There was José de la Luz, a former revolutionary veteran who lost his leg in the Battle of Puebla. He led a group of men to rescue people trapped under the rubble. There was also Dr. Jesus Maria Morelos, who set up a field hospital to treat the wounded. And don't forget Enrique C. Creel, a lawyer and future president of Mexico who rescued dozens of people from the ruins of their homes. These men and the thousands that followed them exhibited incredible bravery, selflessness, and determination in the face of such a terrible disaster. They were determined to help the people of San Francisco rebuild their lives. Unfortunately, though, their efforts were often hampered by red tape and bureaucracy. For example, the Mexican military was slow to arrive, in part because Diaz had been reluctant to commit so many troops to the relief effort. And once they did arrive, they were often in the way. Colonel Juan N. Mendez, who commanded the Mexican forces in San Francisco, was frequently at odds with the city's leaders. This was partly because Mendez was a dictator in his own right, and he didn't take kindly to being told what to do. But it was also because the Mexican military was ill-equipped to deal with the scale of the disaster. They lacked the training, supplies, and equipment to deal with such a large and complex operation. Nevertheless, they tried their best, and they accomplished a lot. They rescued thousands of people from the rubble, provided medical care to the wounded, and helped to restore order to the city. But it was the Mexican civilians who really made the difference. They were better suited to the task at hand, and they were more attuned to the needs of the people they were trying to help. For example, the Red Cross wasn't able to begin relief operations until 5 days after the earthquake because the organization's supplies were stuck in East Coast warehouses. In the meantime, the Mexican Relief Committee was already on the ground, providing food, water, and medical care to those in need. Despite these efforts, though, the situation in San Francisco was still dire. The fires were still raging, and the city was still in chaos. And so Diaz decided to send in the cavalry. He dispatched the elite rurales, a mounted police force that was tasked with restoring order to the city. The rurales arrived on April 24th, just 9 days after the earthquake, and they wasted no time in getting to work. They patrolled the streets, quelled any disturbances, and arrested looters. They worked alongside the San Francisco Police and the National Guard, and they played a key role in restoring order to the city. One of the most important tasks assigned to the rurales was the protection of the foreign relief workers. By this time, thousands of people from all over the world had come to San Francisco to help with the relief effort, and they were vulnerable to attack. The rurales patrolled the streets in groups, armed with rifles and pistols. They were a visible deterrent to potential attackers, and they successfully protected the relief workers. The rurales also played a key role in the rescue and relief operations. They worked alongside other first responders to rescue people from the rubble and provide them with food, water, and medical care. They were particularly effective in this role because they were mounted, which allowed them to reach areas that were inaccessible to other rescuers. But perhaps the most important contribution of the rurales was their presence. Simply put, they brought stability to a chaotic situation. Their discipline and professionalism restored order to the streets of San Francisco and created an environment in which the relief and rescue operations could take place. In the end, the San Francisco earthquake and fire was one of the deadliest and most destructive natural disasters in U.S. history. But it was also a testament to the courage, compassion, and determination of the people who came to the aid of the suffering city. And among them, the Mexicanos stood out as true heroes. They risked their lives to save others, and they worked tirelessly to help the people of San Francisco rebuild their lives. Their efforts did not go unnoticed. The people of San Francisco will never forget the help that Mexico sent to them in their time of need, and neither will the people of Mexico. The earthquake and fire was a tragedy, but it also brought two nations together in a common cause. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can prevail. And with that, I'll see you next time.